Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about initiation in Kriya Yoga. So one of the hallmarks of Kriya Yoga is the idea about initiating the student. And this is something that's very common to yogic paths and to other kinds of spiritual paths where you have sort of a guru-disciple relationship or the teacher-student relationship. And it really gets formalized in this initiation, setting up the relationship initially. And so there's different Kriya Yoga schools that have different types of initiation. Some of them, the one that some of you may be familiar with, the Self-Realization Fellowship one that Yogananda started, has to do with a ceremony that sort of sets this formal connection between the guru and the disciple. And the idea being, there can be things where the student will provide some offering, right? Normally in the form of flowers and money. And then there's this sort of sacred fire, the yajna fire, which is considered to be burning up the karma, the negative karma of the student. And the idea is that surrendering oneself to the guru, who is considered as a representative of God, will remove the karma from the students so that the way is clear for them to learn. And then they learn the sacred Kriya Yoga and they're able to sort of ascend in their spiritual development. So very much around that. So the actual initiation itself in Kriya Yoga schools can be like that kind of initiation where you have many people together in one group getting initiated. And in the case of Yogananda, where he passed in the 1950s, and sort of that tradition carried on with representatives in his organization. And other Kriya Yoga schools may do similar kind of initiation rituals, right, where they establish a formal connection between the teacher and the student, or maybe the founder of that particular path. And so there's those kind of things. In the Panchanan Bhattacharya lineage, so that was Lahiri Baba's preeminent disciple, this is the lineage that I'm part of, it is very much about the initiation of the student and the teacher as a sort of direct relationship, usually done one-to-one in the sort of traditional householder lineage. And so what are some of the benefits of initiation? Now, what it really does in a ritualized form is Kriya Yoga initiation sets up that relationship between the student and the teacher, right? So definitely you want to have that, right? Because the teacher is going to be providing the information, the teachings, and helping to guide the student through their practice, and being somebody who the student can turn to in times of challenge or question or whatever within those particular practices or any kind of spiritual questions or challenges that they're going through. So establishing that relationship, very good. The other thing that sort of initiation does, or a close relationship with the teacher goes, is that there is a transfer, if you will, of the vibration from the teacher to the student. And so I've talked about this in a video where I talked about Kriya Yoga and the secret of darshan, right? Basically the idea about being attuned with the teacher. The teacher is reached a certain level of development and consequently has a certain kind of resonance, right? A certain vibration in holding their consciousness at that particular level, right? Which is a direct result of their spiritual experiences and their practices. And so they hold that energetic space, if you will, and when a student comes into contact with that, they can start to attune to that vibration, right? So that transfer, if you will, some people call it Shaktipat, right? This transfer, spiritual empowerment. It's really about the student becoming in attunement with that particular teacher, right? And depending on the development of the teacher, that vibration is going to be different, right? So if we were in the presence of Lahiri Baba, probably it would be very, very strong. And so when we tune into that vibration, we start to connect with it, we start to resonate with it. This is a concept that's called Gan Ying in Taoist internal alchemy, which basically means like harmonic resonance with a particular field, vibration out there, right? So that is really important. And certainly that is a key aspect of the connection between the student and the teacher, right? So it is often assumed that a ritualized based initiation imparts that, but that is not necessarily the case. one does not necessarily need to have a ritual, an initiation ritual for that transference, that attunement to happen, right? There just needs to be a relationship developed. And certainly if a teacher is going out there and initiating many, many hundreds or thousands of students, you know, the chance for an individual connection with those students may not necessarily be there. And so that's why I think it's a bit of a challenge from my perspective when the teacher doesn't know the students, yet there are many that are initiated under them, and there isn't a personal kind of relationship there. Now, certainly recognizing that some organizations have gone out and they want to spread Kriya wide, right? You know, so they even have correspondence courses on Kriya and that kind of thing. Recognizing that the Kriya itself, it's very valuable, but then you kind of miss that personal connection, right? Many religious or spiritual traditions may be involved in ritual but have lost the meaning. So the ritual was a way to codify certain practices that allowed sort of energetic connections, and then it became symbolized in forms, right? So it might be yajna, sacrifice, right? And when people forget the meaning behind it, it's because they don't have the energetic connection necessarily. And so the ritual, the form, becomes more important than the actual substance in those cases, or one forgets the ability to connect to the true substance, right? The actual real connection, the spiritual connection, and then it just an outward, you know, going about the rituals, right? And that's something that tends to creep into spirituality, and we've seen it across many, many religions where people will follow these very rigid kind of rules or practices, but they don't necessarily embody the essence of those practices. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case for everyone at all, but it's a tendency that we see in a lot of religions, right? So you see it in Christianity where only certain esoteric teachings were basically hidden, right, from the masses, and then they get the outward form. So that's really a danger when the form becomes more important than the substance behind it, if you will, right? And if you don't have that personal, you know, connection with the teacher, you're more likely to fall into that. And when that does happen, what we tend to see is people obeying the rules of outward behavior, but not necessarily having inner realization. And certainly that's been my experience being in certain Kriya Yoga organizations where everybody is, you know, smiling and pretending to be very devotional and loving. They're not questioning, they're not trying to move forward. They're just following the routine, if you will, right? Being on the treadmill and hoping that things will change, but day to day, things not changing for the better. So this is a downside. So here's the question. If you actually had the practices of Kriya Yoga, the full practices, right, and you were able to learn them correctly, would that give you the same opportunity for spiritual development as one who had been initiated, right? So from my perspective, I would say that if you have a teacher that you have a strong connection with, and you're diligently following practices and applying yourself and trying to get in attunement, and you're asking intelligent questions, and you're tweaking what you're doing, and you're working away at it, you don't necessarily need formal initiation to make progress. And so this goes against what a lot of traditions will say. I would say from my perspective that the form isn't as important as the substance. And many people who embody the form, meaning they follow the formal ways of doing things, right? They do a formal initiation and they follow the formal set of routine practices, right? May not necessarily apply themselves in the same way as somebody who's not following the form, but trying to get to that substance, trying to get to that essence, to that development, because they're self-directed, right? And then they use the teacher as a springboard to move forward. That is really the way that I would see that true guru-disciple relationship working. So while I recognize that some students are seeking a formal connection through initiation, and I would certainly honor that, I also honor students who are seeking more of an informal relationship but want to work in a self-directed way for their own spiritual development. And in this day and age when there is much information out there on the internet and other sources about Kriya Yoga and other spiritual paths, people are going through a process of experimenting, trying to find their way. And certainly the old ways of religion, hierarchy, and dogma are not fitting the needs of, you know, current students, right? So for that reason, the formal initiation may not necessarily work for a lot of people. But I'd be interested in your thoughts. If you have a particular perspective on this, please leave a comment. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.